So the election is over, basically confirming the words of good old Uncle Joe Stalin. He who votes decides nothing, he who counts the votes decides everything. But, of course, the whole thing was rigged from the beginning because neither candidate in any of the contests, I believe, was the sort of person who would be able to bring about some sort of proper positive changes in American society. That being said, we did have one good thing happen. Donald Trump fired Jeff Sessions. As usual, when a good thing happens, half the country rises up in arms and cries foul, even though these were the same people who, when Sessions was first appointed, were the loudest ones saying, oh, he's a racist, oh, he's a bigot. And in this case, they were actually right, because he kind of is, and has spent the entirety of his tenure as Attorney General just basically going after poor black people who happen to run afoul of our country's draconian drug laws. However, now that he's on the receiving end of Donald Trump's animus, we all have to step up and defend Jeff Sessions. Well, no, that's completely insane and idiotic. However, people were convinced to turn out in the streets to protest the firing of Jeff Sessions and the fact that the Russiagate probe might be in jeopardy now. And so we have to #protect Mueller. Now, this is the biggest slab of bullshit, pardon my profanity, but that is really the only term that can properly embody the insanity that is protect Mueller. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with Robert Mueller, who I keep referring to as Mueller, his Mueller, I have a mental block against the proper pronunciation of this man's name, and I don't really know why. Mueller. We don't need to protect Mueller. We need protection from Mueller. Robert Mueller, when he was the head of the FBI under George W. Bush, not only was instrumental in getting us into war in Iraq, which, as of course, hindsight being 2020, but even then we knew that there were no actual weapons of mass destruction. However, that didn't stop him from getting up in front of everybody and saying, oh, well, you know, there's going to be a chemical attack, there's going to be a biological attack, we know he's got those weapons of mass destruction. So saying this in 2003 when we already knew that there was no such thing, and so basically he's complicit in that. He was also instrumental in implying that there was no way we ever possibly could have seen 9/11 coming, even though there were multiple whistleblowers within the FBI that were basically told to sit down and shut up when they warned their superiors that, hey, you know, there's a lot of really sketchy stuff going on here, and regardless what you might think about the official story of 9/11, even if you believe everything that the 9/11 Commission report says, then you still have to say, why were these FBI whistleblowers ignored? They came forth with plenty of proof that there was some dodgy stuff going on, and why were they ignored? Robert Mueller comes up in front of everybody and says, oh, well, you know, there's no way we could possibly have seen this coming, so we must just spy on everybody and take their library records and take their banking records and take their phone records too, because, you know, terrorism. So that's Robert Mueller that we have to thank for the complete shredding of the Fourth Amendment that occurred as part of the PATRIOT Act. He was instrumental in basically saying, you know, if we had had these far-reaching, completely unconstitutional powers before 9/11, we would have been able to stop it. But no, in our historical revisionism in crazy fake liberal world, Robert Mueller is a saint. He's St. George slaying the dragon that is Donald Trump. It's just lie after lie after lie, piled on top of lie with lie sauce. And also Robert Mueller was instrumental in bungling the anthrax investigation, which bears an uncanny resemblance to Cesar Sayocs' recent mail bomb, quote unquote. Well, for some reason, the media coverage of this keeps failing to remind people that they weren't actually like active bombs that could have gone off and actually injured anybody, to say nothing of the fact that none of these people opened their own mail, so the whole idea of sending them a mail bomb with the intent to actually injure them is absurd. And even Sayoc had said that, at least before he lawyered up, said that he didn't actually intend to injure anybody with these devices, and it was just to make a political statement or whatever. There's so many dodgy things around this case that I don't even want to get into that now, because this video will be 4 hours long. But anyway, these anthrax letters. So Mueller got into the anthrax investigation when they were going after this guy Hatfield, who there was not really any evidence that it was this guy. However, they were really trying to find some evidence. They couldn't, nothing matched up. He was working with the wrong kind of anthrax. He didn't have the ability to like produce it in sufficient quantities, and he of course maintained his innocence. So Mueller finds these bloodhound dogs from who knows where, who had a history of like coming up with faulty leads and the people they convicted being exonerated and such. But these dogs decided that, oh, Mueller's your man. This Hatfield is your man. And so they go after Hatfield. And then finally, it comes out that, no, he's not. And has to get paid a multi-million-dollar payout by the government. After that, they went after this guy, Bruce Ivins, who had a history of mental illness, and he was a much more likely suspect, at least in their mind. However, there were also a lot of discrepancies. He worked with the wrong kind of anthrax. He didn't have the proper laboratory setup to reproduce it in sufficient quantities, to mail it with the letters. And there was a lot of dodgy stuff. However, they hounded him basically to the point that because he was mentally unstable, he killed himself. And then, of course, the proof gradually trickled out that, yeah, it wasn't this guy. Oops. But they pinned it on him because dead men tell no tales. So that's Mueller, wrongful conviction of the biggest terror case that he had his hands in, and oops, bungled that, just like he bungled the whole 9/11 thing. Mueller was instrumental in the shredding of the Fourth Amendment. Through the process of not only creating the perceived need for the Patriot Act, but also the unprecedented rise in the use of the national security letter as a means of spying on American citizens, basically with no warrant, with no cause, no probable anything, all constitutional protections thrown to the side because terrorism. National security letters are was one of the most controversial portions of the Patriot Act. Basically, you send one of these things, and your bank has to turn over records, libraries have to turn over records, telecoms companies, everything that you do is then open for spying to the government because terrorism. And the use of these national security letters increased 100% under him on the first 5 years of the Patriot Act. And then an Inspector General comes in and says, hey, you FBI guys are really abusing this. Like, you have to actually follow the procedures. We made it really easy for you to get one of these things legally. So just, follow the rules. And Mueller said, sure, sorry, our bad. And then they didn't. The following year, found they were doing just the same thing. And he said, oh, well, it's because we don't have enough resources, because we can't spy on American stuff. Basically, broken record of what he was saying going into 2001. The Inspector General's investigation revealed thousands of illegal national security letters. And, of course, since they come with a gag order, nobody who is the subject of these things actually knows that they're the subject of these things, which is a big problem, because I don't know about you, but I would personally like to know if my bank has been forced to turn over records about me to my government. However, we can't always get what we want, I guess. Instead of arresting the FBI agents who broke the laws in the accumulation of these national security letters, he merely created a separate layer of bureaucracy to deal with them and basically shunt them off to the side where they couldn't do as much damage. And this is, of course, bureaucracy only moves in one direction and gets more and more and more of itself, unless it is violently cut down, which then the FBI is not actually going to cannibalize itself. Let's be realistic here. He was also instrumental in the recreation or sort of revival of COINTELPRO, and his FBI stepped up the warrantless surveillance of Muslims, because terrorism, after 9/11 with an unprecedented vigor. And they basically created this whole process by which people could be entrapped and then railroaded into terrorism charges. There were dozens of cases in which they infiltrated mosques, and their informant or agent or whoever would sort of radicalize groups that had maybe been talking idly about terrorism, or had been not even terrorism, just talking about their discontent with the way things were going, or what the U.S. was doing in the Middle East, etc., etc. Totally valid things to be talking about, especially if you come from that part of the world and maybe have family over there that you don't want the U.S. to bomb. But they would send in these agents who would then proceed to radicalize these groups and give them bomb-making materials, offer them their expertise in putting together bombs. Basically, these people who they were entrapping for terrorism charges had no way of actually carrying out these acts, if not for the FBI informants that they would send in there. And this was done dozens and dozens of times. The Liberty City 7, now hundreds of them, in which there would be no case if not for the FBI informant. And so that was Mueller. That was the liberals' boy here, basically railroading innocent Muslims into terrorism charges, which, if you know anything about the laws surrounding these things, it's really basically impossible to beat a terrorism charge, because it's thought crime, basically. The intent of building a bomb and blowing something up is more important than the actual blowing up of the thing, which is ridiculous. And, this is not what our country was built on, but, most of what our country is built on has been washed away with time. Oh, a good quote, yeah. The Justice Department's mission went from being reactive to being proactive. Prevention is now the #1 priority, and that's the ex-U.S. Attorney General for Southern District of Florida, Guy Lewis, in describing the plight of the Liberty City 7. And let's see, what are the other crimes of Robert Mueller? Because there were so many, I forget them all the time. He wanted to have snipers positioned on the rooftops to shoot Occupy protesters. In 2011, in Houston, their memos have been uncovered finding that, and this was towards the very end of his term. As we know, Obama kept him on 2 extra years because he was doing such a great job under George W. Bush. So he had to be kept on for FBI director until 2011. And his FBI in Houston was saying, well, we need to position snipers on rooftops in case, things get out of hand with these protests that the occupiers are doing. So they were going to shoot Occupy protesters, take out the leaders on the rooftops in Houston in case, protests got a little too protesty, which is utterly horrifying. I actually didn't know that until I was researching for this video and for a piece I did on the radio a couple days ago. So that's really horrifying. And the fact that liberals are now stepping out to say, oh, protect Mueller, we need to ensure that the Russiagate investigation can continue to find nothing and, you know, take up all of our time and resources. And so that basically is the sum of the case against Robert Mueller, but that's a pretty damning case. And the fact that liberals were turned out in the streets supposedly protesting to protect him because, you know, Jeff Sessions was removed and maybe this new attorney general won't have quite so much patience for a 2-year-long baseless witch hunt as Sessions did, because obviously, I mean, I think that they have somebody has got a photo somewhere of Jeff Sessions in a Klan hood or something, because this guy is just the complete picture of just a total caricature, a joke, a failure of a human being, and his like drug warrior stuff is just like, I mean, it's ridiculous. It would be a very humorous situation if it didn't have real world fallout in terms of people being locked up and people being taken away from their families and whatnot. So good riddance, Jeff Sessions. I want to say good riddance, Robert Mueller, but he's still hanging around. And if you're a liberal and you're protecting Robert Mueller, you are a traitor to your cause, and you are a traitor to every other person who considers himself on the left or a liberal, or just like, you know, the resistance. If you're actually a resistance of any kind, Robert Mueller and the FBI want you dead. That's what the FBI does. COINTELPRO. Look it up. Don't look it up on Wikipedia, though, please, because that shit is embarrassing. Look it up on any sort of, like, reputable anything. I don't know, the Jacobin magazine has written a bunch of good articles describing the unlikely romance between the fake left and the FBI, which I suggest you read. I'll link to them in the comments of this video. But basically, I mean, if you are supporting Robert Mueller and you're protesting firing of Jeff Sessions, you're a useful idiot. Don't be useful. And for fuck's sake, don't be an idiot. The ruling class is not your friend. Just because you don't like Donald Trump doesn't mean people who are trying to get rid of Donald Trump are good people. You know, it's possible for two sides in a conflict to be wrong. This isn't, like, really complicated and difficult to understand. So please, like, get your head on straight. Don't protect Mueller. You need protection from Mueller. He wants you dead. What is this?